This is my husband's t-shirt. He got it at the flea market in Yuma, Arizona. If you've ever been, you'll have spotted one of these at one point. It's way too big for him. He got it in a double XL. They didn't have any in his size, and he really, really liked it. And he hardly ever wears it because it doesn't fit. So I'm going to cut it down for him and make it fit. And I'm going to show you how. For my first step, I folded the t-shirt in half because I want both sides to mirror each other exactly. And I've used a t-shirt that fits him really well. He actually wore this yesterday, so it's not fresh out of the wash. It's pretty much formed to fit his body. I didn't want it fresh out of the wash because it would have been shrunk a little bit by the dryer, and I didn't want to cut this too small. I'm also using a square because it's a little bit long on him too, and I figured it was safe to lose a couple of inches, and the hemline's really crooked, so we'd like to sort that out. I've also pinned around the armhole shape, and I'll cut along there. I thought this might be a useful tip as I'm cutting along the seam line here for the sleeve. I've folded back the sleeve and I've felt for the seam, and then I'm going to cut along there so that I get a more accurate shape. I also thought I should mention that I'm using a rotary cutter, so if you're using scissors, you probably want to pin this down so that it doesn't shift while you're cutting. But with the rotary cutter, you don't really need to use a lot of pins. And here's the cut. Oops, missed a spot. There we go. Here's what it looks like after I removed the template t-shirt. And here it is opened up in all its glory. I noticed the hem's a smidge crooked, so I'm going to straighten that out. It wasn't much, but I'm a bit picky. Take your sleeve, turn it inside out, and trim right along this line. So the top edge of the sleeve is on a fold, and that's really the most important part to line up. I've put the armhole seam close to the original, and the hem of the sleeve you can see is a totally different shape, but it matches up down here. I may keep this shape, I may trim it, but I think this might have to be a judgment call after I try it on him. But we'll see how that goes. I'm going to cut it now. Just thought I should mention that I decided to pin down the edges along where I'm going to cut, just so it doesn't shift. Here it is after cutting. As you can see, the edge is a little bit choppy. So you can go ahead and straighten that out with your scissors. I'm going to use my French curve. This is not an essential tool unless you're seriously into pattern making or sewing, but a helpful tool nonetheless, but not necessary. So as you can see, it wasn't a whole lot to trim, but it's just so much nicer when it's smooth like that. Okay, so here's something funny. I just stacked the other sleeve underneath the new sleeve shape, and as you can see, the hem edge of the uncut sleeve is really, really different from the other side. The fold edge has to be matched. That's sort of an unchangeable, so it's matched. And yeah, this must have been interesting to wear, so we're gonna straighten that out. Okay, because I'm pretty particular about my sewing, I'm going to fix this the right way. And I'm going to undo this hem right here, move it, re-sew it, and then cut out the new shape. It's going to be a little bit more involved, but I think I'll be happier with the results. So to start, I trimmed off the underarm seam allowance, and now I'm going to unpick this. I'll spare you the boring details. So now I've got this hem all unpicked here, and I'm going to fold it up and match the hem allowance to this one. I folded up the hem and pinned it off. I'm going to deal with it later. First, I'm going to cut out the sleeve. Next step, I've opened up the sleeves, and as you can see here, I've got this hem allowance turned up, and I have all this excess. I'm going to leave it on there, and I'm going to trim it after I sew it. I'm going to measure approximately 2 centimeters to match this hem allowance, and I'm going to mark it with a line so that I don't make it crooked. And I'm going to sew it with a double needle to match this double needle stitching here. So to keep this hem allowance laying smooth while I sew it, I'm going to give it a quick press. I'm also going to mark my 2 centimeter hem allowance. So I make sure I sew it straight. Now that I have that line marked, I'm going to put in some pins to help me while I sew it, because it's top stitching and I can't keep an eye on what's going on the bottom, and I don't want it to shift around on me, otherwise you can end up with a real mess. All right. I just want to explain something that you see here. Okay, so this part of the hem allowance right here is the same width as the original, because that's the part that's not getting trimmed down. It's a match to the other side. This is the part that's getting trimmed, right? When you sew with a double needle, it does almost like an overlocking. I'll show you. It kind of looks like that on the back, and here it is on the front. Now, this is going to be close, right? It's going to be slow, sort of fiddly a little bit as I'm sewing it. But I see sometimes people are ashamed of using pins. There is no shame in using a lot of pins. I find like 75% of sewing is unstitching what you've sewn. And I don't want to do any unnecessary unstitching. So to avoid that, I've got this all pinned down. I know exactly where I need to slow down and be super careful, because I can't see what's going on in the back. And this is bound to get bunched up, or something's bound to happen back there, and I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to have to unpick it. I want to avoid that, considering it's right smack dab in the middle, and I don't want to start over again. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty particular about my sewing, but never be ashamed to use pins. It's a totally legitimate tool and a totally legitimate practice to use. Rant over. Here's what I'm going to need to hem that sleeve. I've got a double needle, and I've got just one spool of thread in the correct color. So I'm going to have to wind a bobbin, of course, and then I'm going to wind a second bobbin to put on the second spool pin to thread the second needle. So I'm only going to partially wind the second bobbin because I don't think I'm going to need that much thread. Before I start to sew the other sleeve hem, I need to measure my stitch length so that they match. It's about 3 stitches per centimeter. As you can see, the double needle and this are clearly not a match. So we're not going to use the double needle. We're going to try something different. My best match is a triple needle with only the 2 outside needles threaded. It's still not exact, so I will use this, and then I'm just going to redo this on the other sleeve. And problem solved. We're getting into the tricky part. I am pretty much over the moon with how this turned out. I was a little worried about this section right here, but thanks to all those pins, everything went perfectly. All I have to do now is trim off this excess, and I have to unpick the other sleeve hem and repeat this process. Fortunately, I won't have to do any trimming, but I'm going to do that next. Alrighty, there we have it. 2 matching sleeves with new hems. Now to attach them to the body. In this particular method of construction that I'm going to use, you first attach the sleeves and then you sew the side seams. So I'm going to pin this sleeve right sides together along this seam. Same thing on the other side, and then we'll sew them together. All right, I'm all pinned up and ready to go. And look at all them pins. Oh boy. All right, so those sleeve seams are all sewn, and I'm going to serge them now, just so they have a nicer finish, more durable for wearing as a t-shirt. So the sleeves are stitched and serged, and now I've pinned the side seams together, both sides, and they're ready to be sewn. Both side seams have been stitched and serged. And next up, there's the other one. Next up, we have the hem, which we will do exactly the same as the sleeve hems, as a 2 centimeter with the double needle top stitching. And I will mark the hem the way I did with the sleeves, and I think we're almost there. In order to facilitate a nice even hemline, what I've done is I've marked a line 4 centimeters from the bottom, because this is a 2 centimeter hem, just like the sleeves, and I'm folding it up, ironing it, and pinning it. Then my hem will be straight. I'm reintroducing the triple needle. I will thread the inside and outside needle so I have a better spacing. This is the same thing I used on the sleeve hems. Finish the hem with the double needle top stitching, same as the sleeve finish. I also added this little stitch right here. It holds down the serging on the inside of the sleeve, and that is the finished shirt. Let's try it on.